All right, all right, all right. Welcome everyone to our very first episode of the Pilla Tax Academy talk show. I'll be your host today, Jay Nolan. I've got our special guest, tax expert, and tax litigator, Mr. Dan Pilla. I know we've got so much attention around this particular subject, and it's a subject that's completely miffed most people. The subject of taxes. When it comes to taxes, think about your first thought. How many of you are so fired up and excited and want to just jump up and down on the subject of taxes? How many people are literally like, I can't wait to pay my taxes. I can't wait to deal with the IRS. Well, most people, they just don't feel great about the subject of taxes. And so what we wanted to do with this platform is tackle that subject and literally make taxes something that people are not afraid of. People are literally empowered by. Imagine you being confident about taxes. So why is this platform so important, and our guest, Mr. Dan Pilla, so important to every single person that will be viewing this, whether the live or the recording of this, the replay? Why is this so important? Well, you'll hear me say this over and over. Grades 1 through 12, think about this. We went to school, grades 1 through 12 for most of us, and that equals around 14,000 hours when you calculate that. Now, how many of you had classes teaching you how to master taxes? How about a big fat almost zero? Okay, we go to another 4+ years of college for some of us. And how many more people get taught anything about how to handle their taxes? Or hardly anybody. And so I cannot wait for our guest, Mr. Dan Pilla, to be able to tackle some of these misnomers, tackle some of these questions. We've got questions that are poured in that are some awesome questions. I can't wait for Mr. Pilla to be able to finish the story. For those of you that saw the video that we put out about this guy sued the IRS at 18 years of age and won. People have been waiting. We've been getting so much communication back to us, Mr. Pilla, about, please, would you have him finish that story? So without any further ado, let's tackle this crazy subject called taxes, and let's make some sense of it. Mr. Pilla, over to you. We'd love for you to introduce yourself and give some opening words here.
Well, first of all, I want to welcome everybody to the broadcast here. It's my pleasure to be with you here. Jay and I go back a long time, and so we finally got our heads together on ways to offer information to you folks that need this help so badly. Taxes are a crippling subject. There's no question about it, particularly when it comes to tax compliance. One thing to fill out your tax return and pay your taxes, that's bad enough. It's another thing to have to deal with invasive IRS tactics like letters and penalties and interest and collection notices and levies and all that stuff. And this is where I want to bring some hope and some help to everybody that's out there listening to us right now, Jay. That's really where we want to focus in helping these folks. I've been in the tax litigation, tax resolution business for over 40 years, about 42 years now. And as you folks saw from the teaser that Jay put out yesterday, I got started as a result of problems my father had with the IRS. He had a small business here in our hometown of St. Paul, Minnesota, got behind on his employees withholding taxes. And in 1974, the IRS padlocked the doors and they auctioned the equipment off for a couple cents on the dollar. And then in 1978, they turned their attention to our family home and they tried to seize and sell it for the back tax liability. And that's when I got started. I got involved just literally as a matter of desperation, trying to help my family solve that problem. And what happened is I came home one day, as we said in the earlier video, my mom was sitting at the kitchen table with a letter in her hand from the IRS, and she says to me, she hands me the letter and she says, "What do you make of this?" And I read the letter and I said, "Well, it looks like they're going to try to seize the property." And she said, "Well, what do we do about it?" Of course, I had no idea what to do, but what I ended up doing is I went over to the local law school, law library in St. Paul. where I grew up, and I started fumbling around in the library in the Internal Revenue Code, and I literally stumbled onto an area of the tax code that deals with taxpayers' rights issues and limits the power of the IRS. And I start reading in that section, and I didn't get 6 pages into it and discovered that the IRS was proceeding illegally to seize the property. And here's what I learned very quickly is that, my dad was the one with the tax debt. He had the business. He's the one that got behind on the employees' taxes. My mom wasn't the business owner. She wasn't an officer or a shareholder of this company. It was my dad's business, pure and simple. And yet she's got an ownership interest in this house. It was her house, no differently than my dad's. And yet now here the IRS is trying to take her property to satisfy his tax liability. And that was completely wrong. And it was expressly wrong per the language of that code section that I was reading. So I did what any 18-year-old would do under the circumstances. I sued the IRS. I literally pasted together a lawsuit following the procedures that I learned in the library over the next couple of days. I filed a lawsuit against the IRS, and before too long, 2-3 months into the process, 3-4 months into the process, I find myself in a federal courtroom in Minneapolis in front of a federal judge. In the meantime, the IRS flew an attorney in from Washington, D.C. to have my case thrown out. Here I'm asking the judge to stop the IRS from taking this property. And so in that court hearing, I stand up in front of the judge and I say, Judge, the law is perfectly clear. They're not supposed to do this. They're doing something that's wrong. They shouldn't be allowed to get away with it. And my argument was about that polished, and it was about that long. I didn't say much. I referred to the law and I sat down. And so now this attorney from the IRS stands up and he starts blathering on and on about court cases this and statutes that. And I didn't know what this guy was talking about, and I'm not sure he did either. But when he was finished, something very, very distinct and clear happened that set the stage for what I was going to do for the next 40 years. What happened is the judge looked over at this attorney. He looked over here and he pointed at me. He pointed his finger at me and he said, "He's right." And he slammed the gavel. And I thought, well, this is easy, Jay. I mean, I stopped the IRS and I've been stopping them ever since.
How did you feel 18 years of age and a federal judge points at you, and then says, "You're right"? What feeling went through your body at that time?
Well, it's odd, Jay, because here's the thing. Moving up to that point in time, with what precious little bit of investigation I did, I just heard that you couldn't stop the IRS. Well, I didn't know you couldn't stop the IRS. I just figured that this was the right answer. I mean, there's no, obviously I was very pleased. I was very satisfied. No question about that. But there wasn't this sense of David and Goliath, feelings washing over me, because as far as I was concerned, it was just simple, cut and dry. And I didn't know you couldn't stop the IRS. I didn't know the prevailing attitude at the time was that the IRS could do anything that it wanted to. And so because I didn't know that, it just seemed so logical and so reasonable to me that the court would stop them. And that's exactly what they did. And as I said, I've been stopping them ever since. Because here's the fascinating part of the story, Jay. In between the time that my dad got in trouble with the IRS in the early 1970s and the time that I was in that federal courtroom in Minneapolis in the late 1970s, my dad got involved with the tax protester movement. Now, a lot of you people out there probably heard about this. This is these are the arguments that say that income taxes are voluntary and they don't apply to U.S. citizens and the tax laws are unconstitutional, and all these various iterations of these arguments, none of which work, by the way, just incidentally. But my dad got involved with that the way that most people do. They get involved as a matter of desperation because nothing else is working for them in terms of getting resolutions to their problems. So they grasp at straws. They reach out for whatever desperate argument happens to be on the table. My dad stumbled across this and he got involved with that. Well, here's the thing. In that courtroom that day in 1978, the courtroom was packed with my dad's tax protester buddies. There must have been 80 or 90 people in the courtroom that were affiliated somehow or another with these various groups, and they all had tax problems. So they saw the judge slam the gavel. They saw the judge stop the IRS in connection with my argument. So by the time I got home to my mother's house, Jay, they were lined up at the door. These people were lined up at the door and they said, "Dan, can you help me with my tax problem?" I said, "Sure, baby, I'm undefeated here. Let's go." And so it was an instant
time out. This is so good. Here, listen, we've got people coming in. I want everybody to do us a favor. Share this on your wall. If you're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, share this with at least 3 to 5 people you know that have to pay taxes. They've got to hear this information that Dan Pilla is sharing. This is going to empower people. So, Dan, you got a line outside your house for real when you get home.
Real. Yeah, there was, I mean, they weren't wrapped around the corner, Jay, but there was folks lined, there was folks at the door wanting help with their situation. And what I did, Jay, is now, yeah, I've got a baptism by fire here now, right? And so what I do is I approached every question, and I do the same thing today, more than 40 years later. I approach every case with 2 very simple questions. What is the IRS doing in this situation? And what does the law allow them to do? And what I discovered then, what I stumbled onto in my mother's case, and what I found systematically over the years is that the answer to that question is 2 different things. The law does not allow the IRS to do what it's trying to do half the time, Jay. Half the time. They're violating their own rules, and people need to understand this. And this is what my research and my work has done over these 40 years, is put tools in the hands of people, Jane and Joe American, Mr. and Mrs. Small Business Owner, to be able to stand toe-to-toe with the IRS and not to take advantage. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about keeping your own money in your pocket where it belongs. The message is very simple. We got a responsibility to pay the taxes we owe. There's no question about that. But you don't have a legal duty, Jay, to pay 1 penny more than you owe, particularly if the IRS is not following the rules. So this is very important information for people, because the IRS sends out millions of notices every year that take people by surprise. It blindsides folks because they don't understand what their rights are when they're dealing with this agency. And that's what my information has been all about for all these years.
Hey, we got a chance to hear that story straight from the man's mouth. We call him the father of the tax resolution industry, and maybe we should call him the godfather of the industry. People ask about that. I mean, Dan, we're seeing, I started noticing in the last 3 to 5 years, especially, a high escalation of commercials saying, if you owe $10,000 or more in debt, call this number. Why would those commercials be running so much? And how did that start, Dan?
Well, it started, Jay, as a result of the work that I did in the early 1990s. I released a book in 1992, Jay. Then Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service, a lady named Margaret Richardson, who, by the way, was the best IRS commissioner in my 40 years of dealing with the agency. She was the best commissioner that I've seen. There have been some good ones. Anyway, let's get to the point. The point is that in 1992, she orchestrated 8 very specific administrative changes to the Internal Revenue Code, not to the code so much, but to the IRS's procedures, that allowed people to get into meaningful negotiations with the IRS in situations where they had crippling tax debt. And in fact, she made the statement to Congress when she introduced those administrative changes to Congress. She said, these are her words, not mine, you can't get blood out of a turnip. And when we're dealing with turnips, we're better off cutting our losses and moving on. What she was saying is that they had an epidemic at the time, which is far worse now than it was then, by the way. But they had an epidemic at the time, Jay, of people that couldn't pay their taxes. And the IRS was escalating enforcement and escalating enforcement and escalating enforcement. And they were basically chasing ghosts when it came to their ability to collect money. And so they made these 8 specific administrative changes. I jumped on those changes immediately, and I wrote a book called How to Get Tax Amnesty. How to Get Tax Amnesty was released in 1993, and it became the first, and for the longest time, the only systematic step-by-step guide for negotiating with the IRS that was ever written. All right, so my book laid out for the first time to the American people specifically how they can negotiate in very differing and very varied situations. But the common denominator was, I owe taxes to the IRS I can't pay. I'm facing wage levies, bank levies, property seizures, tax liens, just like my dad did. Exactly the scenario that my dad faced. And how do you deal with the situation? And that tax amnesty book, Jay, took off, and the reason it took took off is because there was nothing else like it in the market. Nobody was out there doing this work. At that time in 1992, 93, you could count on one hand the number of people that were out there doing this work, and they were a small fraternity of guys that I was associated with around the country. And so what happened is we sold hundreds of thousands of copies of that book over the next 10, 15 years, and about 15% of the people that bought the book were tax pros. And they would hear me on the radio. I was doing radio interviews across the country, Jay. I've done 6,000 radio and TV and newspaper interviews since started this in 1998. And about 15% of the people that would hear these interviews, hear about my book, were tax pros. They'd buy the book. They put themselves in business based on the information they learned in my book. This industry did not exist until that book was released. I created the tax resolution industry with the book, How to Get Tax Amnesty. That's undeniable.
That's amazing when you guys think about this. All those commercials you're seeing, that's all because of that tax amnesty book that has sold hundreds of thousands of copies, that Dad has done revisions and updates multiple times. And this is what I love about it. You've taken that book and now you brought that book to life on the Pilla Tax Academy. So before we get into some of these questions that people have, how important, for example, is taking that book and putting things, I'm sorry, not that book, that's coming.
That one's coming.
Got so much, that's so many.
That one's coming.
This is coming, but if I got a book right here called The IRS Problem Solver that you wrote, and when we talk, you say, I want to see if you can bring this book to life. Why did you ask me that question, and what have we done, Dan?
Well, first of all, Jay, that book that you hold there was ranked by the Wall Street Journal as the #1 tax book in America. And that book, and the reason that book is so important, and the reason we started with that book, is because that book deals with all the most basic kinds of problems that a typical American taxpayer, Jane and Joe American, Mr. and Mrs. Business owner, might find themselves in. All right. We're not talking in that book about the egregious, crushing problems like my father had. Right. We're not talking about the kind of problems that keep people from realizing their dreams, their business dreams. We're talking about basic situations. Just for example, the IRS mails out 100 million computer notices every year to people. They issue about 35 million penalties to individuals and businesses. These are basic situations that can be managed very effectively and very simply if you've got the right guidance. And that's why we started off with the book, The IRS Problem Solver, because it is going to apply to everybody. And in fact, I would argue to you, Jay, that even if you don't have a letter from the IRS, and even if you don't have a penalty notice in front of you, this is the information you need on your shelf for future reference. Because if they're mailing out 100 million notices a year, and we know they are, if they're hitting people with 35 million penalty assessments a year, and we know they are, sometimes higher than that, there's only 150 million tax returns filed every year. It's not going to take very long before your turn comes around and you got one of these notices or you got one of these penalties, and now you're going to need to know how to deal with it. So that's why we started with that basic book. It's going to help everybody with a pulse in the United States that files tax returns needs to have that problem solver material.
And so, okay, grades 1 through 12, we don't get the education. Now you got the book, but then we take the book and we create a virtual course on Pilla Tax Academy that will be offered tonight. How many of us think it's exciting to be able to have Dan Pilla himself, not someone that just wrote the book, but then turn around and have him teach the in-depth strategy behind this book? So, Dan, why did you think it was so important to take this book and turn it into a virtual classroom where you taught the book all the stuff that people didn't get in school? Why is that so important?
Well, people love videos, Jay, don't they? They love videos, and this is an opportunity for me to flesh out with real life hardcore examples. For example, I've got a chapter in the book on dealing with penalties. It's one of the biggest problems there is. In fact, there's 2 chapters in the book dealing with penalties. One chapter is focused at small businesses. One chapter is focused at Jane and Joe American. So there's 2 different varieties here of penalties that we talk about. And so over the years, I've had so much experience in dealing with penalty issues, failure to file, failure to pay, the negligence penalties, the penalties that businesses face. You know, Jay, I said there's 35 plus or minus 35 million penalties assessed against businesses and individuals every single year. 2/3 of those penalties are assessed against small businesses, even though they only make up about 20% of the tax return filers. So this is a huge problem for small businesses. And to be able to talk to folks on camera in that seminar environment, if you will, I am able to bring a lot of rich examples, case studies to folks that aren't in the book right now, because we got so many of them, right? So we've got this opportunity to flesh this stuff out with very, very detailed, specific examples that are going to give people the tools they need to move ahead with any sort of challenge to IRS penalty assessments.
Then you wrote another book, Big Time. You just talked about businesses. So we're talking about Dan Pilla's Small Business Tax Guide. And this one really took me out when I read the back of this, Dan. And it says, a key reason small businesses fails because of IRS problems. The tax code heaps a mountain of reporting, payment, and compliance obligations on small businesses that most business owners don't know anything about. In fact, I want everybody to listen what Dan wrote here. He says, in fact, the Government Accountability Office once counted more than 200 distinct obligations, not suggestions, obligations placed on the shoulders of businesses. And Dan asked us all a question, business owners. Can you name all 200? Can you name even 20? Then Dan takes this book and creates a course, a virtual course to help people master the tax guides and the tax things that are happening with the IRS. Dan, can you please talk about how important that course will be for small business owners and business owners?
Let me just put it to you this way, Jay. What happened to my father never has to happen to another American if they have this material. Right. My father got blindsided by employment tax problems. As I said, 2/3 of all the penalties assessed against individuals and businesses are assessed against small businesses in particular. And almost all of those penalties revolve around the area of employment taxes. I've got a couple chapters in the book that deal with employment taxes. I got a chapter in the book, Jay, it's the second chapter in the book, called 15 of the most common mistakes small businesses make and how to avoid them. One of the most significant in terms of numbers now, clients that I've had over the years are small business people. All right, small business people are the backbone of the American economy. Small business people, entrepreneurs with vision and ingenuity and creativity and drive, they're the people that are responsible for pushing the economy of the United States around the bases, Jay. These are the base runners that get on, get over, and get in, right? And if you don't have a vibrant small business environment in any economy, guess what? Your economy is dying. And so we've got to have small businesses out there. And the only way to have small businesses out there is with people who are confident enough not only to bet on their ingenuity, which that's fine, but also have the confidence to know that they're not going to get blindsided by one of these 200 booby traps and pitfalls that are built in the Internal Revenue Code that most business owners never know are there until it's too late. So these are the tools they need. Listen, I've taken my 40 plus years of experience in litigating with the IRS and solving these kinds of problems, and I've put them into a formula that will allow people to avoid the problems in the first place. And that's the key as far as I'm concerned. Listen, problems resolution is expensive and it's painful. Problem avoidance, that's pretty easy. And so what I do is I expose these booby traps and these pitfalls and the quicksand pits that are laced throughout the tax code. Look at the tax code consists of 4 million words, Jay. 4 million words.
I want everybody to hear that. When you first told me that, I went 4 million words. And Dan, do they change those words around?
The tax code has been changed more than 5,900 times just since 2001 alone. It's a massive quagmire of messy rules and regulations, an endless stream of arbitrary rules that people just simply can't wrap their heads around, Jay. And so what I've done is isolated the most common problems that businesses have, the most common ways that they get in trouble and get tripped up. And I lay out a specific strategy for you that's going to keep you out of trouble with the IRS.
This is the stuff. This is why this is so important. And I'm passionate about this, being one to be able to help with the executive production of the media involved here, because I know I've had problems. I consider myself, pretty smart, pretty intelligent, pretty spontaneous and an entrepreneur. And here I go running out there and I'm going to go start my business. And bam, I had no idea of what I was doing and not doing. So to have this information is so important, so vital. Now, Dan, this is what most people will say, because I know, well, I've got an accountant. They've got this covered. I'm good to go. What do you got to say about that, Dan?
Well, it's you mentioned earlier, Jay, about this 14,000 hours of education in primary school, and then another 4,000 or 5,000 hours if you go on to college. If you go to graduate school, it's even more than that, as we know. And then, of course, all your life experiences add up there too, right? But we know that this basic tax information is not taught in primary school. It's not taught in higher education. But it's even worse than that, Jay. There are hundreds of books out there for small businesses that will help them with, how to set up your business on the internet, how to set up your marketing, how to write a business plan, how to go to a bank and ask for money, all these various things that are very, very important, very necessary, very desirable. But there's nothing on them. And never mind in school, Jay, forget that for a second. There's nothing on the market out there today that is going to show these businesses how to stay out of trouble with the IRS. Now, you mentioned CPAs. CPAs they play a vital role in the tax compliance world. There's no question about that. That's undeniable. And as a matter of fact, one of the 15 most common mistakes businesses make, I talk about this in the Small Business Tax Guide, one of the 15 most common mistakes that small businesses make is not having competent accounting help and bookkeeping help. It's a mistake that you need to avoid. But here's what the problem is. We're talking the world of accounting and the world of problems resolution, Jay, are two different worlds entirely. And this is why I get an ongoing source of referrals for small businesses that are in trouble with the IRS from the accounting firms around the area that I work in. All right. So they're referring clients to me that have gone beyond the scope of their skill, and the scope of their skill is the accounting tax preparation world, not the problems resolution world. And here's the thing you need to understand. And this is what small business people need to wrap their heads around, because the other thing we hear all the time, Jay, is, well, I'm honest, I don't have to worry about that. I got a CPA, I don't have to worry about that. The problem is the CPAs don't work in this world, and this is the world that I live in. And so the information that is in this book, you're not going to get from your CPA. I've heard people tell me dozens of times over and over again that they've learned more from me in 15 minutes about problems resolution and problems avoidance than they learned from their CPA in 3 years. Why is that? Because I'm in a different world than they're in. And this, whether you like it or not, as a small business person, as Jane and Joe business person, this is the world that you're thrust into simply because of the fact that you got a pulse with a business in the United States.
Man, I want everybody to pick this up now, because what I'm picking up, Dan, this is so vital information. Y'all be sure to share this. Everybody share it. Invite friends to see this. That way we can empower people. You're hearing Dan Pilla, the top expert, in my opinion, on taxes in this country. He just told us there's a disconnect. Dan, I don't know what we do here, because if you're saying that most of the CPAs and accountants don't understand this, but every single person that I know thinks their CPA is the be all of be all for keeping them out of trouble. How do we get that connected?
Well, I think small business owners have got to go through the Small Business Tax Guide Master Course, for no question about that, and get one for your CPA. Get a Small Business Tax Guide Master Course for your CPA so he can get this information, she can get this information as well, so they they are exposed then to the kind of material that they need to know to be more helpful to their clients.
I love this, man. Imagine everybody watching this, having access. How many of you are excited about having access to the correct information on how the tax code works and how to stay out of issues, how to stay compliant? I said yesterday on a Facebook Live, our goal here with the Pilla Tax Academy, as I see it, is to help be a bridge between our government and the people, to get rid of this animosity and say, okay, if it's there, let's deal with it. If it's there, we got to deal with it. And let's deal with it the right way. The last one I want to talk about before we get to questions, there's tax pros that are watching this, that are going to be watching this. There's CPAs, there's accountants, there's tax attorneys. You just did what is considered the top conference in the entire nation in regards to tax defense. What would you have to say to someone that is a tax pro? So you got a lot of people who's going to be watching this. I would encourage them to share this video with their tax professional. What would be your message to the tax pro, Dan?
Well, very, very simply, Jay, I would say this. I've been teaching tax pros, attorneys, accountants, and enrolled agents. I've been teaching them actively, proactively, teaching them the tax resolution business for 25 years. And we've got a seminar that I've been doing for 25 years. In fact, I think this was our 26th seminar we call the Taxpayers Defense Conference, which is an exclusive presentation for tax professionals, attorneys, accountants, and enrolled agents that are either in the business of tax resolution or want to get in the business of tax resolution. And I teach them exactly how to do this work. And again, it's one thing to read a book. The book is very helpful. It's very informative. It's very, very effective. That's undeniable. But now at the seminar, you've got live presentations and interaction with other tax pros that do this work on a regular basis. So we've got the 2020 Taxpayers Defense Conference Master Course that's available now for folks who didn't have an opportunity to attend the live seminar that we did at the end of October just a few weeks ago. But here's the exciting part of it, Jay, and this is something we've never done before. We've live streamed the seminar. We had your top-notch media people record the seminar. So we got top-notch audio and video recordings of this seminar. And something else that we've never done before, Jay, we've taped all the question and answer sessions as part of our presentation materials. So in years past, we never did that. We taped the lectures, but not the questions and answers from the crowd. Now we've got questions and answers from the crowd. So when you attend the Taxpayers Defense Conference through our master course, it's going to be just like you were there.
Yes, this is important. Now I got a question that's come in saying, hey, I'm excited. I'm an entrepreneur. And they hear that you say 150 million tax returns are filed every year. And there's all this discord and all these tax notices going out. So it seems like a pretty lucrative business. I've got a question that's come in that says, can I get involved with tax resolution? What if I'm a person that's just an entrepreneur? Can I get involved in tax resolutions? And can your course help me do so?
Well, the course is going to teach you how the Taxpayers Defense Conference Master Course is specifically pointed at tax pros. Now, any person can become a tax pro. You don't have to be an attorney. You don't have to be a CPA. There's a designation in the Internal Revenue Service called enrolled agent, and anybody who can pass the examination to become an enrolled agent can be admitted to practice before the Internal Revenue Service and represent people in audits and appeals and so forth. And so that's fine. So if that entrepreneurial spirit takes you down that road, that's all well and good. That's fine as far as being an entrepreneur and making this information available on a broader scale through the entrepreneur channel. The guy to talk to about that is Jay. He's gonna, he's our marketing team here, and work with him to make that happen.
It's awesome. So on the Pilla Tax Academy, on the platform, we have a fully encrypted platform. There will be a section there that has information like this, a library. There's all kind of resources for people that want to get involved. We're going to give you some direction and let Dan help guide you. Dan, do you have resources and connections with all across the country with tax pros?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got an organization called the Tax Freedom Institute, which is my national association of tax professionals. And this is a group of about 80 or 90 law and accounting firms that have teamed up with me over the years. And we work together on these problems, provide sounding boards for each other and continuing education for each other. So that's part of our program as well. Yes.
I love it. All right, Dan, let's get into these questions. I know people are wanting to get some questions answered. Dan, normally before I get into this, what do you charge people if they want to get a consultation with you? What does it cost them?
Well, my billing rate, Jay, is $350 an hour, and so it depends on what kind of a structure you have, but that's basically the billing rate.
I want y'all to think about this information you're getting tonight for free. Okay, here goes our first question, Dan. What do I have to do if I don't have enough money to pay the taxes that I owe, especially with what's just happened with COVID? People want to know what they have.
Well, yeah, that's a good question, and this is a growing problem. There's no question about it. We're seeing massive uptick, Jay, in the number of people that are behind on their taxes because of the COVID situation. The first thing you need to understand is that there's a procedure that's available in the IRS. It's been around for a long time. It's a procedure that actually allows you to freeze collection in a situation where you cannot afford to pay your taxes. If you are right now either unemployed or underemployed, or in the case of a small business person, you've got your revenue stream has been interrupted because of this COVID situation to the point where you now are facing financial hardship because you don't have enough money to pay your living expenses or necessary business expenses, never mind your taxes. The IRS can freeze collection through a program they call currently not collectible. And so what you do in that situation is you make contact with the IRS, say, look, guys, there's no way I can pay this debt right now because of my income stream is way down. The COVID put me on my back here, so to speak, financially. The IRS has the authority to freeze the collection account. Push the hold button on the collection account. Take your file and move it to the back burner to the point where you're not even on the burner anymore, Jay. Now you're on the shelf, right? It's not even on the stove, it's on the shelf. And so they do not actively pursue any collection while you're in that situation. And that uncollectible status designation can continue for years. I mean, sometimes it's 2, 3, 4 years that it can continue depending on your situation. Now, the IRS will review that from time to time, and assuming you get back on your feet, they're going to want you to start talking about paying at that point in time. But in the meantime, they're off your back and they're out of your life.
That is strong information. That's just to be here. You want to be here, and we're going to be doing these pretty much on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. You don't want to miss this. There's a question coming in on the message board here from Ron. He says, Dan, last year, this month, in fact, you wrote a really good article about the IRS on the brink of collapse. I really enjoyed reading it. Can you comment on their state of affairs now? And do you still remain hopeful that will happen?
Well, the collapse part of it, you mean? I believe I'm the only guy in America that's dedicated to putting himself out of a job. There's nothing I'd like to see more than the abolition of the IRS and the income tax. I believe there's a much better way to do it. And we can talk about that, but it's way beyond the scope of this discussion. But let me answer your question very specifically. Yes, a year ago, I wrote an article. I believe it was published on WorldNet Daily, or might have been one of the other places. My articles are picked up by a lot of different places. But I did talk about the collapsing IRS and the weight that the system was under. And what was bad then is even worse now. What was an IRS in trouble then is a broken IRS now, Ron. And this is because of COVID, obviously. We got a situation where the IRS was completely shut down for almost 8 weeks, starting around, I think it was around the first week of April through just about the end of May. They were completely shut down. And when I say shut down, Ron, the IRS wasn't even getting its mail. So we had people mailing their tax returns and mailing their checks to the IRS through the U.S. postal system. And those letters, those envelopes, those checks not only weren't being opened, they weren't even brought into the building. The Postal Service was loading mail into shipping containers in the parking lots of the Internal Revenue Service campuses around the country. They had the taxpayer advocate estimated that by the end of May, they had 5 million letters that were backlogged. All right, so now the IRS starts to open up, and there was 20 million letters. Now this is incoming mail, right? 5 million incoming letters, and this is just by May. Who knows what it is now? They also had 20 million letters that were printed and in the system ready to be shipped out, mailed out to taxpayers that did not get mailed. And you'd say, okay, well, that's great. I didn't get my letter from the IRS. You know, that can't be a bad thing. Well, here's what the problem is. The IRS started operating at least partially around the end of July into August. They started some operations and they started up some of their mail operations. Here's what happened, Ron. They didn't bother to reprint those 20 million letters. Instead, they just started mailing them out. Well, here's the problem.
Wow.
Most of those 20 million letters carried a deadline. And by the time those 20 million taxpayers got their notices, the deadline was passed. And so it created all kinds of panic and all kinds of havoc with millions of people across the country because of this, because of the way they're operating. And now all the systems of the IRS are bogged down, and it's like it's a system like I've never seen before.
How many of you think this information is valuable? Share it. Share it. This is stuff that people just are not going to be able to hear. So when you come into the Pilla Tax Academy platform, then I can't wait for people if they think this is hot on the front side out here in public, wait till they come on the inside of the Pilla Tax Academy, where we have the forums, where we are able to bring people in and be able to have special conferences and special opportunities to have even more in-depth conversations. Dan, another question. Great one here. If you incorporate a business, but don't actually start a business in that incorporated year, are you obligated to do any filing for that year?
Well, that's a good question. And it's a question that traps a lot of people, frankly, Jay, because they say, well, if I didn't have any income and I didn't have any expenses, do I have to file a tax return? The IRS will take the position that any corporation has to file a tax return, regardless of its tax liability. Of course, if it's a C corporation, it would have a tax liability. If it's an S corporation, it would have no tax liability. But the IRS will take the position that the return is required regardless of the financial activity. So if it's in existence, the best thing to do is file the tax return. And of course, you'd have zeros on the return. I would be careful about filing a tax return with zeros on it, because that's one of the old-fashioned tax protester strategies that would get people in a lot of trouble. And now that doesn't mean that your return is inaccurate if it's got zeros on it. But what I would do is I would provide some information with the return that will make it apparent that you're not a tax protester by filing a return with zeros on it as far as income is concerned. I would use what's called a disclosure statement. It's IRS Form 8275, 8275. It's a disclosure statement. It allows you to provide information with the tax return that will answer any potential questions raised in the tax return, so as to avoid a face-to-face audit. So when you submit a return with zeros on it, you would explain on the 8275, actually explain in detail the fact that this was your startup year, you haven't started generating any income yet, and so the financial activity for the first year of the corporation is essentially at zero. That would be the safest thing to do.
Y'all understand how powerful this information is? Next question.
Now let me say this, Jay, before we go to the next question. In the Problem Solver Master Course, I have a section in there on audit proofing tax returns, where I talk about this very subject at length. It's very, very valuable information that everybody that ever files a tax return needs to know about.
So in the master course on the Pilla Tax Academy that you guys will have access to, we'll cover that here a little bit later in the show. Once we wrap up, we'll show you how to get access to all this information, to get it in your hands, to help you master this. Why we call it a master course. This is something, a subject that everybody needs to master. Dan, another question. What should I do if I get a letter from the IRS?
Well, the first thing to do, this might sound flippant and silly, Jay, but it's not. First thing you do is open the letter and read it. Now, why do I say that? I'm telling you, I can't tell you how many times people have come into my office, Jay, with a grocery bag full of letters from the IRS that aren't even opened up yet. All right. Don't let that be you. Don't be one of these people that ignore your, I get calls from people who say, Dan, I got this letter from the IRS. I don't know what to do. And I'll say, well, what does the letter say? And they'll say, I don't know. I haven't picked it up from the post office yet. Well, go get the letter. Read. The people are so, Jay, this is a point that's important here. People are so afraid of the IRS and so intimidated by the IRS that often they are afraid to even read the mail. Don't be
Wow.
that person. Don't make that mistake. Read the letter. The IRS issues 100 million notices every year. Most of them, Jay, most of them are dealing with small problems that are easily resolved if you get your arms around it on the front end. Now, for those problems that are very serious, like collection problems, if you owe money and the IRS is in your face for money, every single one of your rights as a taxpayer is time sensitive. You have to exercise those rights within a certain period of time, and that letter carries a deadline. If you blow your opportunity to challenge or appeal, in many cases, it makes fighting back very, very difficult. All right, you're right. You understand this, people. I'm going to repeat myself. The rights that you have as a taxpayer are time sensitive. You have to exercise them by a deadline or you lose them in the vast majority of cases. So don't let yourself hide from these letters. Your IRS problem is not going away just because you're hiding from the letter.
Wow. Strong. That's why getting on the portal, on the platform, getting access to the Pilla Tax Academy, in my opinion, is going to empower so many people because you're going to have access to the info. Dan, big question. Is an LLC the best option for a small business to stay protected?
Well, not necessarily. An LLC is a limited liability company, Jay, and it's a good option, but it's not necessarily the best option. The problem with an LLC is exactly the same problem you have with a subchapter S corporation. It introduces a whole new layer of compliance that you have to stick to when you're dealing with an LLC. Here's the other part of the problem with an LLC that confuses the heck out of people. An LLC is called a disregarded entity. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that in the Internal Revenue Code, there's a very specific scheme for taxing partnerships. There's a scheme for taxing sole proprietorships. There's a scheme for taxing regular corporations, what we call a C corporation. And there's a scheme for taxing S corporations, small business corporations, subchapter S corporations, which most people have heard of. But there is no scheme in the Internal Revenue Code for taxing a limited liability company, an LLC. And so therefore it's a disregarded entity. So that doesn't mean that you can't be an LLC. What it means is that your LLC is going to be taxed either as a sole proprietorship, a partnership, or a corporation, depending on how you choose to have it taxed. Now, here's what the problem is, Jay. The vast majority of people that set up LLCs have no idea that they have to make an election as to how that entity is going to be taxed. And so when they don't make an election, then the default rules apply, and people don't know what the default rules are, Jay. So you got one problem that leads to another, that leads to a third problem, which is now you're out of compliance because you A, didn't make the election, B, didn't follow the default rules, and so now C, the IRS is in your face with all kinds of penalties and demands for things you never knew you had to do. In the Small Business Tax Guide Master Course, I have a section in there that very specifically describes all of the 8 entities that are available to function under. LLC is one of them, partnership, sole proprietorship. I go through all of them with you, so that when you're done, you understand what these entities are and how they work, and then you can make an intelligent decision which entity is best for you under the circumstances.
Shouldn't people have been taught this in school or at least in business school? Can you comment on that?
Well, you don't learn this stuff in business school, Jay. I mean, you don't. We know you don't learn it in primary school. You don't learn it in college. I suppose if you take a business law class, you might learn the difference between a partnership and a corporation, possibly. But you certainly don't know what the tax compliance obligations are compared, between a partnership, a corporation, an LLC, and a sole proprietorship. And this is, again, this gets back to what we alluded to when we first started the broadcast tonight. All of this information is in the Small Business Tax Guide Master Course, precisely because you can't get it anywhere else.
This is, I hope everybody understands how powerful this is. And this is only going to get better. This is only going to get stronger. And you're going to have access. I can't wait for people to be empowered. I love this. Here's a big one, Dan. If I keep good records, do I ever have to worry about a tax audit?
Well, you certainly don't have to worry about the results of a tax audit. That's for sure. Listen, 2/3. Let's talk about small businesses here again. Small businesses are my passion, Jay. I love entrepreneurs. I love these people that are willing to bet the farm on their creativity. As I said earlier in the program, our economy exists because of small businesses. Our economy exists, and the things that we have in this country and the luxuries that we enjoy and take for granted, including this computer that I'm talking to right now, are brainchilds of entrepreneurs, small business people that get a vision and then they go after that vision. But the fact of the matter is, we know that 2/3 of all penalties are assessed against small businesses. Here's what also we know, Jay, that 2/3, roughly 65% of all of the audit disallowances, every tax deduction disallowed against a small business by the IRS as a result of an audit, arises because of bad record keeping. All right. So this is one of the key problems that small businesses have. They don't know how to keep records. And you say, well, you got an accountant. Isn't your accountant keeping records? Accountants don't keep records for you. You can have the best dentist in the world. And if you don't brush your teeth and floss your teeth, it doesn't do any good. You're the one that has to keep the records. So I've got a chapter in the Small Business Tax Guide Master Course that shows you exactly how to set up a proper record keeping system so that if you are targeted for an audit, you don't have to worry. Here's the thing that people need to understand, and this is what is so vitally important and what is so remarkably different about our tax system compared to every other area of the law. In every other area of the law, Jay, if the government's got a claim against you, they got to prove it. If they accuse you of robbing a bank or running drugs, they got to prove it. When we're talking about the IRS and a tax audit, they don't have to prove anything. They never have to prove you did it wrong. You have to prove you did it right. And so the burden of proof is on the taxpayer, and that means you've got to have the proper records properly organized and properly structured so that if the IRS does challenge you, you can prove your case. When you have the proper record keeping system, the answer is no. You don't have to worry about an audit. If you don't have the proper record keeping system, if you're audited, you're going to owe money.
This is awesome. Listen, here's what we're going to, because we're going to do something special. By the way, guys, we're going to do a drawing for a Amazon gift card. I think it's as much as, I think it might either 50 or maybe even $100. I'm going to check with the team here, but when we're done, we're going to do a drawing. Here's how you get in the drawing. You need to comment. So if you think this is great information, everybody put a comment in. If you appreciate Dan taking the time tonight to share this wealth of information, comment, put it in the comments that you appreciate it. Then here's the thing. If you share this video, your name then goes in this drawing for this Amazon gift card, which we will announce tomorrow. So tomorrow we're going to do, this is huge. There's going to be so many people around their families tomorrow. Can you imagine if you get announced as winning the Amazon gift card because you did what? You went in, you commented, you said, I appreciate it, I love the info. What's impacting you the most? Because there's going to be other people watching this. And here's what you can do to contribute. You can put in what's impacting you the most from this information, what you're most excited about, how much you appreciate it. And if you just simply hit the share button, all you gotta do is hit share and just post it to your wall. Then we're going to know that you shared it. We'll go behind this when this is done and we'll see that you shared it, stick your name in a drawing, and we'll do the drawing live and we'll announce who's got that free Amazon gift card. Dan, we got a few more questions here. And we appreciate you taking the time because I know this is powerhouse information helping a lot of people. All right, here we go. Great question here. Dan, this is, if I've been audited before, why did they audit me if I kept accurate records and did everything the way I was supposed to do? Yeah, if I did everything the right way, if I put all the information in there, if I literally did everything to the T, and I had an accountant do it for me, why'd I get audited anyway?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jay, and it's very common. You know, why is the IRS picking on me for audits? They have done it before, and now they're doing it again. But look, here's the thing: every single tax year, we need to understand that, and this is particularly true with small businesses. Every single tax year rises and falls on its own merits. All right. So if you get audited for 2017, for example, and the IRS decides that you made no mistakes, that doesn't mean that you didn't make any mistakes in 2019. All right. So just because you did it right in 2018 and you can prove all your deductions in 2018 doesn't mean that the IRS can't find something wrong with 2019. So that's right off the bat. Every year stands alone. But here's the other thing that we need to understand. Just because the IRS selects your tax return for audit does not mean you made a mistake, and it doesn't even mean that they necessarily think you made a mistake. The vast majority of the returns that are selected for audit, almost 70% of the returns that are selected for audit, are selected through a sophisticated computer program known as the DIF system, and that's an acronym for Discriminant Income Function System. And what it does is that program compares every line of your tax return with national and regional statistical averages for a person in your same income category and profession. If any line of your return is out of sync with those averages, the difference is scored. That's called a DIF score. So the higher the score, the more likely you are to be audited. Not because there's a mistake, but because the higher the score you have, the farther away from the averages your entries are, meaning that the greater the potential for an error in the return. So that's why you can have a tax return that's audited for 2 or 3 or 4 years in a row, particularly business returns. Now, keep in mind, friends, that if you have a small business, whether it's an LLC, a corporation, a sole proprietorship, the IRS can look at any item on that return for any year, and you have the burden of proof on it. So again, just because they looked at you for last year or even the last 3 years in a row doesn't mean they can't look at you next year. So you always have to assume that you're going to be audited. And in fact, in the Small Business Tax Guide Master Course, in my discussion of the 15 most common problems that businesses have, is one of the 15 problems is the assumption that people have that they won't be audited. You need to assume that you will be audited. And by assuming that you will be audited and keeping the proper records and making sure that you maintain the records to prove your deductions, you don't ever have to worry about an audit. So what if you're selected? You'll have to jump through some hoops. That's true. Can be a bit of a hassle. That's true. But at the end of the audit, you'll have your money in your pocket where it belongs. That's the key.
This is awesome. Powerful. Guys, you got access. This is what the bottom line is. You got access. We'll take one more question. And then, guys, we'll be doing these ongoing. So can you imagine how valuable this is as you keep getting this information? Your empowerment, your confidence is going to go up. The higher your confidence, the happier you're going to be. We want to remove the fear out of you. Dan, somebody put in a question. If you're married and both owners are, I'm sorry, 1 second. Let me get this here. If you're married and both, if you're married and both own the business, are you considered a sole proprietorship or a partnership, or does it even matter?
Well, it certainly can matter, and that's a good question, Jay. And it causes a lot of confusion, and that's another thing that I address squarely. in the Small Business Tax Guide Master Course. What happens if you and your spouse are married? You're working the business together. As far as the IRS is concerned, you're a partnership. They expect you to file a Form 1065, which again introduces a whole nother layer of compliance to the tax scheme, making matters worse. However, there's a structure, there's a designation in the Internal Revenue Code that I promise you next to nobody knows about, and it's called the Qualified Joint Venture Arrangement. And what it means, Jay, set all the legal mumbo jumbo aside. Here's what it means: husband and wife who are working a business together, they are the owners of the business. It's not a corporation, all right? It's not a corporation or an LLC. So it normally was a sole proprietorship, or let's say historically was a sole proprietorship, but husband and wife work it together. In that situation, what they can do is file 2 Schedule C forms. So you take the gross receipts of the business, you cut it in half. You take all the business expenses and you cut it in half. Half of the income and expenses go on husband. Half of the income and expenses go on wife's Schedule Cs. Now we got 2 Schedule Cs. We haven't increased the income by a nickel because all we did was cut everything in half. But here's what we accomplished. By doing that, Jay, now both the husband and the wife get get earnings reported for Social Security purposes, so that the wife or the husband, whoever's the person helping the other one, gets the benefit of Social Security earnings over time. Because what happens under the normal Schedule C, the normal sole proprietorship arrangement, Jay, the husband or the wife, generally the husband, is filing the tax return, and he's got his name on the Schedule C, even though the wife is working side by side with the husband all these years, and then come to find out, 15, 20, 30 years later, she's got no Social Security earnings reported in her name, and now her Social Security benefits are significantly affected for negative purposes because no benefits were reported or no earnings were reported. So this allows you to report those earnings, Jay. It's a good technique for getting both earnings under the names of both spouses.
Dan, what percentage of the population knows what you just said?
I can't imagine anybody knows that, Jay. I can't imagine, which is why I have it in the book.
We got this course, and I love that you brought this book alive in a way. Can y'all hear Dan talking tonight? How many of you realize he knows what he's talking about? Again, if you appreciate this information, whether you're live, you're watching the recording, I see all the comments coming in. Can you guys please just post your appreciation and what stood out to you the most? What did you learn the most? Because other people are going to come on and they're going to see that you're commenting, and it's going to help increase the energy of confidence that we want to bring to the tax game. One last question, and then we'll talk about how you can get access to the Pilla Tax Academy platform. Just one last one, Dan. This is June coming in, and I don't know if you can answer this or you can't. Let's see if you can. What do we have to be aware of if we take money out of a retirement account, IRA example, before 59 and a half years old in regards to the CARES Act?
Well, the first thing you need to know, and people get whacked by this too, Jay. I can't tell you how many times I've dealt with people that take money out of their 401k and they think to themselves, well, if I just make a 20% withholding deposit, that'll be enough. You need to understand that if you're under 59 and a half and you take money out of a qualified retirement account, 401k or an IRA, that distribution is taxed as ordinary income, and it's taxed based on your income tax bracket. It's not taxed at a flat 20%. Why people have this 20% number on their head, Jay, I cannot understand, but everybody seems to think it's a flat 20%, and they think if they withhold 20%, they're golden, and you almost never are. Plus, you need to also consider this. If you're under 59 and a half and you take that distribution, the 10% penalty for early withdrawal applies. So now if your tax bracket is 25% and you have the 10% penalty, your tax is not 20%, it's 35%. And if you spent all the money, now you owe the IRS another 15%, and you don't have the cash to pay them. So that's number one. Now, under the CARES Act, there's some relief that was provided that allow people to take some distributions and to spread the tax liability over time. And that's fine. You spread it over a couple of years, but it doesn't go away, Jay. You still owe the money. So the most important thing to understand if you're considering a withdrawal from a 401k is that now here's where your accountant is going to be very, very helpful, is to sit down with your accountant, your CPA, your tax preparer, and say, okay, if I take 50 grand out of my retirement plan, what's that going to do to my income? How much am I going to owe the IRS? And don't fly by the seat of your pants. This 20% is an arbitrary number. It doesn't mean anything. So sit down with your tax pro and work through the numbers so you know that it's going to be 28% or 32% or 50, whatever the number is going to be, and that's what you got to provide for.
This is going to be so exciting to watch what happens as this begins to build. I want to give a special thanks to all the tax pros out there that are watching this particular stream, because we want to encourage you to begin to come and collaborate on the Pilla Tax Academy. There's going to be opportunities for you actually to join and be a member of the Tax Freedom Institute with Dan Pilla and as the Pilla Tax Academy, and be involved on that platform. Real quick, Dan, do you want to talk about how important that's going to be, just real short, before I talk about the opportunities available tonight?
Well, very simply, Jay, it's going to give you an opportunity to get live interaction with me on an ongoing basis to get questions answered.
Y'all got that? So tax pros, can you imagine? You got that live interaction, and then you got that access, which is Unbelievable. So everybody check this out. If you're on the chat, make sure you help us out so people have access to what I'm about to say to you, because everything we talked about tonight, you've got access to it. So go to PillaTaxAcademy.com/promo, PROMO, because there's a special discount you can get for every one of these master courses that Dan touched on. PillaTaxAcademy.com/promo. For example, if you're a tax pro and you didn't get to the tax conference, you weren't there. When we release this live, which will be any day now, probably in the next 24 to 48 hours, this is a full production, high quality professional event that you can pick up 12 continuing education tax credits for. You'll be able to take this course. It'll be $995 worth every penny of it when we do it live. Dan's authorized for you to be able to have a $200 discount over on the promo tab. So PillaTaxAcademy.com/promo. Instead of $995, you can get that for $795, and that comes with the continuing education credits that a lot of people are paying $150 to $250 for per credit. So it's worth that just to pick up that. Now, what about if you are a small business owner? And I see a lot of people on here that are commenting may be small business owners in some way or another. Well, get on the Small Business Tax Guide Master Course. That's a $495 course. Can you believe that? I'm talking about having a master education in the small business world, tax world, $495. But if you go to the promo, there's a $100 discount for you to be able to grab that course. Now, that's a pre-sale. That's going to be delivered within the next 10 to 14 days, estimated within the next 10 to 14 days. I've been told by my production crew, no later than December the 10th. So December the 10th, you can get early access to that. You can save $100, $395, and now you got the master course. Now that you got the master course, what's important with that is that you have the ongoing support and all the things that come with it. I'm gonna have Dan touch on each one of these and why this is so important. Now, for your everyday taxpayer who didn't get this information in school, you missed it, grades 1 through 12, went to college, you missed it. And now you got all this hairy, scary stuff out there in the tax world and all these 100 million tax notices going out that could very well be you. You want to take the fear out of that. Well, how would you like to have the master course? The IRS problem solver. You'll be able to pick up that course for $295, but you can pick up a $50 discount over on the promo tab, PillaTaxAcademy.com/promo, save $50. That's coming out on or around December 10th or before. So you got access to it. Now, Dan, they get access to the master course, but you talked about these weekly ongoing question and answers that will be recorded that's loaded. You talked about newsletters. What's some of these other things that will come with that master course, Dan?
Well, let's talk about the newsletter, Jay. I published a newsletter called Pilla Talks Taxes. It's been in continuous circulation since 1988. I've written over 1,000 articles on taxpayers' rights issues, IRS abuse prevention and cure, and problems resolution. I've written articles on tax policy and administration, and I've written dozens of special reports on these topics as well. All kinds of research reports, Jay, that are high-level research reports. All of that information is going to be available on that platform. All right. So as every time we produce a newsletter, it's going to go up, and our members, our participants are going to have access to that information. We're going to have an archive of old newsletters, so you can go back and look at some of the stuff that I've written in the past, in the recent past. We're obviously not going to go back 15 years with this stuff because it's not that relevant anymore, right? But the recent past, so you're going to have access to the archives and the reports and so forth. And as I write more material and as we produce new newsletter issues, this stuff is going to go out. When we release an article, it's going to go out. The other thing is this live interaction, Jay. We're going to have an opportunity for our members, our participants, to join us on this platform that we have now. and participate with us in these questions about their specific situation. So if we've got, let's say we've just got 100 people on a particular call, on a particular conference, and a person asks a question about their particular business structure or their particular situation, I guarantee you that many of the people listening on the call are going to have the same question or same problem. So by helping one person, we're able to help dozens of people at a time with these calls. And so this is going to be an ongoing opportunity to get interaction with me, to get a piece of me, so to speak, as we go forward to answer these questions and get this guidance.
This is awesome, guys. Get over to PillaTaxAcademy.com/promo while you can still pick up the promo. We don't know how long that link's going to be up. Grab those courses. Empower yourself. Here's a question that just came in, Dan. If I get the course, can I write that off on my taxes?
Well, I'll tell you what, that's absolutely true. If you're a small business person, there's no question about it. The course is deductible as a business expense for small business people. If you're a tax pro, obviously that's continuing education for you. That's necessary expense. That's deductible. And so, yeah, yes, it is.
Beautiful. What a great show. We got so much great feedback from this show. Dan, you got any parting words for everybody that's watching this live and who will be watching this rebroadcast? Any parting words, Dan?
Well, yeah. The parting words are this. Listen, we got a tax code. As I said, 4 million words in the tax code, and the burden of proof is on you. You have to take steps to protect yourself from the IRS so you don't get sideways. The one thing you don't want to do in your life is get sideways with the IRS. So this is your opportunity to get yourself on the right track and stay there.
All right, here's what we're going to do also. I just got a note over here. So for the first 20 of each category, we're going to do a private call with Dan Pilla. So the first 20 tax pros that pick up the defense conference package, you're going to get a very special, intimate on the platform call for the first 20. The first 20, small business. So those with the small business master course, the first 20 to purchase, you get a private exclusive call with Dan Pilla. The first 20 with the IRS problem solver. So the average taxpayer, imagine what that's worth. A private call with Dan Pilla that is going to be encrypted and very private and secure to where you're able to go to an entire different level with Dan Pilla. That's the first 20 for each. So those of you that are hearing this, get the information. I don't feel bad at all offering this. And the only thing I feel bad about is Dan giving a discount on something that he hears me when he was talking about price. And I'm like, Dan, that's too, it's not high enough. People are paying thousands of dollars going to school and getting in trouble rather than getting empowered. Let's do something about it. Thank you, Dan Pilla, for this time. Everybody share this information. We just want to help people in the best way we can. And I feel honored, Dan, to be here with you tonight. It's been a blessing to me, and I know it's really helped a lot of our viewers. Thank you, everybody. Get over to PillaTaxAcademy.com/promo. Get your products. Let's get you empowered. Y'all have a great one. Take care.